Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Donna Steinfeldt, Associate Director Advising Services at ISSS. I am joined by one of our advisors, Madison Mikhail. We are going to go through the OPT presentation. A lot of this will be geared towards post-completion OPT, but there are slides that will give you a overview of as well of pre-completion. So some of the steps are very similar, but the main focus will be post-completion OPT. And for those of you who are graduating this spring, this is going to be very relevant. And if you're not graduating this spring, but in a future term, it's great to prepare, plan ahead. And just so you know, either this recording or a future or past recording will be posted on our website, and we ask that you refrain from questions until the end. You'll be able to put them in the chat, and or if you put them early, we will address them all at the end of the presentation because a lot will be covered as we go along, and you'll realize that that a lot of these questions will be answered during that process. So I will let Madison go ahead and take over for the next slide.
All right. Hello, everyone. Okay, so we're going to start with OPT basics. So the purpose of OPT is to apply knowledge gained in the classroom to practical work experience. And there are two types of OPT. There's pre-completion and post-completion. More often than not, I mean, especially students that are here that are going to be graduating, you're going to be looking at post-completion OPT. And that is a postgraduate benefit of the F1 visa. It's post-completion OPT, the duration is 12 months per degree level, and OPT is authorized by USCIS, not ISSS, so it is not an internal process in terms of approving you for OPT. So eligibility, you must be currently in valid F1 visa status and that you have completed a minimum of at least one academic year in lawful status and in full-time status. And also to apply for OPT, in order to apply, a job offer is not needed. I know it's a question that I do get a lot recently, but yeah, you will not be asked for any like job employment information when applying for OPT. So types of employment. So for OPT, employment can be paid or unpaid. And if it's unpaid, it would be, volunteering or legitimate unpaid work is permitted. That does not violate labor laws. Students can hold up to multiple positions. Changing employers is also allowed. Whether you have one position or more than one position, each week your total work hours need to be at least a minimum of 20 hours per week or more. And that is cumulative if you have more than one position. It's not like on post-completion where each position has to be for at least 20 hours or more. As long as at the end of the week you're hitting that 20 hours cumulatively, then that is acceptable. Just a heads up to Donna and Mike, for some reason, it's not letting me change the slides. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so in terms of one of the other, eligibility for OPT in terms of jobs is working in your field of study. So the employment must be directly related. So a common question is, how do I know if a job is related to my field of study? You can look at duties versus the type of company, compare it to your academic curriculum. Can you justify the relationship? If you were ever asked, in 1 to 2 sentences, how is what you're doing in this position directly related to your field of study? And it could be, say, in such and such job, I'm doing A, B, and C, and that is related for the following reasons. I mean, as long as there's kind of like a clear connection between the two, that is what is being looked for when working in your field of study. In terms of resources for that, if you are having a hard time kind of figuring out whether, job options that are in your field of study, or how to better justify that relationship, we do recommend either connecting with your academic department, your academic advisor, maybe even alumni, as well as career services. We have 2 links there for resources. But that's usually what we do recommend, because as ISSS, we cannot assist with that portion academically. And also your departments know your program best. So that is what we do recommend. Okay, so the next few slides, we're going to go over the OPT application process. So you go to the next slide. Thanks. Okay. So we're going to talk about each of these in detail, but this is kind of just the general overview of the process. So it is a multi-step process, and that continues even beyond adjudication, or when a decision is made on the OPT application itself. So first step is requesting OPT in terms of, or actually, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. So we're just going to show the general timeline, and then I'll go into detail. So as you can see here, from start to finish, it's you as a student recommending things, and then to the very end, the last step is, beyond when your OPT has been approved, in terms of what obligations are required of you with reporting, and we'll go into that as well. Okay. So post-completion OPT filing timeline for spring graduates. So as many of you may already know, and who I've advised so far personally, the earliest OPT application date is going to be 90 days before your program end date. So for May 20th graduates, that's going to be February 20th is when that period began. And then the latest that you can apply for OPT is 60 at the end of your 60-day grace period, which specifically is July 19th. Okay, next slide. Okay. So as before, when I was getting ahead of myself, step 1 is requesting OPT. So first, you're going to want to read the OPT section on our website, and that is the link to that. It has really great information in terms of just the general overview of the process, as well as how to officially request OPT with us. And when we say request OPT, you're going to be requesting what's called an OPT I-20. So to complete that, you're going to do the OPT I-20 request e-form in iPen. You'll log into iPen to do it. It's also going to consist of your department essentially approving it as well. So in the e-form, it's going to ask you to put your academic contact information. So that is going to be the secondary approver. And then for post-completion OPT requests only, there is an OPT pen processing fee, as well as in order to be able to finish and submit the e-form, within it, there is going to be an OPT tutorial that you're required to view. Next slide. Okay. So with requesting OPT, in that e-form, you are going to be asked to choose a requested OPT date. So, and this is something that you do need to decide on your own, but there is a range of time in which that the OPT start date needs to fall within. So the earliest start date that you can have is the day after your program end date. So for May 20th graduates, that's going to be May 21st. And then the latest is within your 60-day grace period. That would mean then the latest date that you can have, as we said before, the end of the 60-day grace period for May 20th is July 19th. That is the latest start date that you can have. So anywhere between May 21st and July 19th. Now, from there, in terms of the end date, how that is chosen, it's going to be up to 12 months from the start date. So as you can see in this example, it's not, USCIS doesn't do, for example, if you chose July 19th to the following July 19th, it would be July 19th to July 18th. And that should say 2025. Sorry about that. And then any approved pre-completion OPT time will be deducted. So if at some point while you were here at Penn, you had used pre-completion OPT. If you had used full-time OPT pre-completion, so for example, if you did a month of full-time pre-completion OPT, then 1 month would be deducted from your post-completion, the 12-month total. But if you did pre-completion OPT part-time, let's say for 2 months of part-time pre-completion OPT, then only 1 month of that would count towards taking away from your total post-completion duration. Then the initial OPT request, though, please be aware, it does not include STEM extension OPT. As I know that's a question that we get a lot in terms of people asking, if they are STEM eligible, why can't they just request the 3 years altogether? So post-completion OPT, that is up to 12 months of OPT, and then 90 days prior to that post-completion expiring, that is when if you're in a STEM eligible degree, you can then apply for that 24-month STEM extension. So next step is DSO recommendations. So as I said before, that request form in IPEN, it's to request an OPT I-20. It is an OPT DSO recommended I-20. So essentially, at the end of us processing that e-form, when we issue you that I-20, that has our DSO recommendation for that USCIS is looking for when you're applying for OPT. E-form processing time is 3 to 5 business days, and we do say 5 to 7 in peak time. I'm going to clarify, though, that is when the form is pending with ISSS. When you first submit the form in IPEN, it first gets automatically routed to your department for them to approve their end. And you'll get automated emails from our system letting you know kind of where it's gone. Once they approve their portion of the form and you get the automated email saying, your department has approved their portion, your request is now back with ISSS for processing, that is when that 3 to 5 business day clock starts. So if you are going into IPEN, you're noticing after a couple days, a few days, that your academic department still has not approved their portion, that's when we recommend, you reach out to them, make sure they received the form. But that is to clarify when our processing time begins, is when it's back in our queue. And the result of it is we issue, as I said, a new I-20 with a recommendation for OPT. The I-20 will be emailed to you electronically, and you will need to print and sign the I-20. Even if we'll talk about in a second in terms of filing, there is an option to apply for OPT online, but you still need to print and sign the I-20. Okay, next slide. Okay. Next step is sending application to USCIS. So big thing to keep in mind, you must be in the US, physically present in the US at the time that you are filing the I-765. Even if it's online, I tell my students, USCIS will find out. They always do. So even if it's online, you still need to be physically present here at the time that you're hitting submit for it. We do have a really detailed instruction guide on our website, and that's what this link is directing you towards. Really detailed. It's both written and screenshot instructions of both how to set up your USCIS portal, and then as well as detailed instructions of filling out the application. So, and then in order to file, you must have received the OPT I-20 from ISSS. And then to file with USCIS, you must do that within no more than 30 days from when you receive the OPT I-20, or USCIS will deny your application. And the issue date on your I-20, I know some people do ask me this, on the first page of your I-20, where you see that an ISSS advisor has signed, right next to their signature is a date. That is your issue date of your I-20. So within 30 days of that date, you need to apply for OPT. And then I know we said before in terms of there's pen processing fees, USCIS itself does have an online filing fee. Right now it's $410. As of April 1, it is increasing to $470. And then if you want more information, that is the link to the USCIS website. They have a file online section. Next slide. So next step, USCIS adjudication. So processing timelines do vary with regular processing. It's right now, it's still kind of early for us to figure out kind of how spring is going in terms of processing times. But on average, throughout, it's typically 3 months on average, but it does fluctuate on either end. It could be sooner, it could be later. There's kind of no rhyme or reason to it or really pattern. But on average, it can take 3 months. So that is for regular processing. If you do decide that you would like to look into premium processing, it is an additional fee of $1,685. And what premium processing does is that within 30 days, USCIS needs to give you some sort of decision or adjudicate your application. And right now that is 30 calendar days, but effective April 1, that's also another change. USCIS is changing it from calendar days to business days. And also you can add premium processing on after the fact. Especially if you are unsure if you want to add it, but you don't want to delay submission any further. As long as your application is pending, still listed as pending, you can go in and add it on after the fact. And then from that date that you've added it on, then that is when that 30-day clock would start. When you've submitted, you will receive a case number from USCIS via electronic notification through your online portal. It's usually a receipt notice that's automatically uploaded to your account as a PDF. And that is what you will use to check the status of your application. If you go to uscis.gov, there is a tab that says check your case status, and that's when you put that case number, and that's when your latest update will pop up. Big reminder that you may not start employment or even training for that employment during this time. USCIS also may send you a request for evidence during the adjudication period. That is an option. That essentially means that the officer, or whoever at the time is reviewing your materials, they decide that they would like to see additional information from you before they make a final decision. Next slide. Thank you. All right, so then the final step, if all goes well, they process your application, it's been approved, is receiving the EAD card in the mail. Now, and it says here, contact us if you see any issue regarding your EAD or errors on the issued card. We do recommend that when you get the card that you're reviewing it, making sure, off the bat, you're seeing that, your name is spelled right, country of birth is correct, your date of birth, the dates that you requested. As soon as you receive your card in the mail, you're going to want to log into IPEN and complete the e-form that's called OPT reporting. And you'll actually get a reminder of this when you are first emailed your OPT I-20. Because we need to, that's our way of essentially ISSS knowing that you received your card. So it's going to ask you to upload a front and back scan of the card. And then we also review the card as well, just to see if there are any issues or anything like that. But that's how we know that it's been approved and that process is complete. So I'm going to hand it over to Donna.
Thank you, Madison.
You're welcome.
So we are going to go into some common topics that come up during OPT. So one question is, when can I start to work? very important that once you have the employment authorization, you want to make sure that you have that card in hand after it's approved by USCIS and as of the start date on the EAD. So you want to make sure you've reached that effective start date with and have the EAD before beginning any employment. Okay. It's very important while you're on OPT that you're doing reporting through IPEN. Um, for example, when you first get your EAD, when you have a job to report, any changes in that employment, changes in your address, it's all done through the e-form. So for example, and must be done within 10 days of any change happening. So when you do the OPT reporting e-form, you'll use that for the OPT employment. If your status change or you leave the US, you'll also report it through that e-form. There also is an address, email, phone e-form where you can report any change in your legal name or address. And what's very important is even just to submit the EAD, even if you don't have a job, we can make sure everything is updated properly in your CVIS record. And it's very important as well that you have this employment recorded in CVIS. So if it's ever asked for in future immigration applications, such as an H-1B, they're going to want to see your history that you had employment recorded and that you did not accumulate unemployment time, which we'll also go over. Now, it's also the SEVP portal is another way for you to see your information. When your OPT is approved, you will get an email to set up that portal from them. It may go into your junk mail, so you may want to, keep an eye out. It's actually not spam. And it's another way for you to see and view your CVIS information. We also have a portal reset e-form and IPEN, but ultimately, the most important thing is to make sure you're continuing to report in IPEN. The portal, SEVP portal it's not a mandatory resource, but it is another way to see your information. But IPEN is going to be where you want to make sure you continue to do any updates. So I mentioned unemployment time. So it's important to note that while you're on your post-completion OPT, you can't accrue more than 90 days of unemployment. So this is something that over those 12 months that you're not accruing an aggregate of 90 days. So if you take, let's say, 30 days before you start your first job and then 30 days in between job 1 and 2, you're only going to have 30 days remaining. So you just want to keep track of that and see, and that's why it's also very important to do your OPT reporting so that clock isn't counting. And it is something that it's from the start of the EAD. So a common question that we do get is, I graduated on May 20th. Does my unemployment time start on May 21st? If your EAD does not begin until July 1st, for example, that's when that time will start. It's going to start as of the start date on the EAD. So if your EAD starts May 21st, that is going to be, that's when it would start. But if you use July 19th as your start date, that's when the time will start counting. Now, it isn't something that's really in function now, but if there is an alert that you haven't reported your employment time, it is possible that CVIS could implement at some point a termination of records if people exceed the 90-day limit. So it is a functionality they talk about here and there and could implement if they decide to. So again, why it's very important to make sure you're letting us know and doing the IPEN to report the start of your first job, end of that job, and any additional employment after that, to make sure that everything stays up to date. So travel, this is a very common question. So I want to make sure everyone's listening because it's probably the most common question we get in the chat and the Q&A section. So hopefully this will clear up most questions. So in certain cases, we don't recommend travel or it's not advised. But if you're traveling and it's before the end of your program, so for example, you're graduating this spring, so before May 20th, once you've applied and you know USCIS has your application, you can travel as you normally would. So you would use your normal F1 documents. If you have a valid F1 visa, you will have the signed I-20 that will give you when you request OPT. You have a valid passport. So your normal travel documents that you would do today or you did a week ago when you went on spring break, that's how you would travel before you graduate. However, after the program end date, it's not as much recommended. And let me just clarify, it's not recommended and there's risk, but it's not that it's prohibited. So the possible risks you may encounter where you travel is one, you definitely want to make sure if you're going to need to renew your F1 visa, not having the EAD will be problematic for that. So you definitely want to avoid travel in that scenario. If your EAD is lost in the mail, you're not going to be here to try and track it down. So many times we do hear about the EAD being delivered to an apartment building, to a main in a mailbox, and in some of the Philadelphia apartments and apartment buildings, we do see it get lost. And if you're here, you can more easily work with the post office, talk to your neighbors, see where it may have gone, and try and like track it down. It's much harder if you're not in the US and physically on site to do that. Um, you want to make sure you're looking at the portal for any requests for evidence and being able to respond to that. If you're overseas and you're not able to do that, that could be problematic. But I would say actually going to the point above that, probably the biggest risk would be if something happens where it's after graduation and your OPT application, it could be denied or rejected for some reason. If that happens, and you're not here, there's no longer a grace period. So you may not have another chance to apply for the OPT because you're not here and you lost that tether to your F1 status. So once you depart and that happens, you're no longer going to be able to come back. Whereas if you're here and it's your grace period, so if you hopefully would get the denial or the rejection and you're still in the US and it's still before July 19th, you can apply again because you're still in the window. So that's probably the biggest possible risk, and why travel is not recommended, as well as sometimes officers can scrutinize if you don't have the approval or you don't have the EAD. Um, the guidance does say you can travel while it's pending, but ideally you'll have your job offer, but it's not required, but you would have that EAD when you are coming back. And ultimately, it is something that you need to decide what's important and what's going to work for you. It's also why it's good for you to start doing the application much sooner than later. And hopefully, you'll have some result before you do have to go. And that way, it's a little bit more peace of mind. Okay, so after OPT is approved, you also want to make sure that you are talking with your employer. So if you have an employer who may be looking to do an H-1B application for you, you want to make sure they're aware of your travel plans because that could impact how they file that application. So make sure to talk to them and let them know of any travel plans. And when you do travel, again, these are the documents that you want to make sure that you're having. And an important note is unlike right now, when you're a current student, your travel signature on page 2 of your I-20 doesn't should be no more than 12 months old when you come in. It does go to 6 months. Now, we are still your F1 sponsor through OPT, through STEM OPT. So this will be something that you will be able to ask for a travel signature from us. When you do your OPT reporting, you can click that you want a new I-20 and you'll have a fresh signature on that. So it's just important that you're keeping track of that when you do travel. Also, the EAD, you'll want to carry that. And proof of employment is recommended. It's basically the guidance says if you have any. So, but if you do have it, make sure you're bringing it with you. Okay. So some of you may be eligible for an OPT STEM extension. STEM is basically majors that are classified as having SIP codes, classification, instructional programs is the technical term in science, technology, engineering, and math degrees. So this would give you an option to be able to extend for an additional 24 months. We're just going to do a brief touch on STEM during this presentation, but just so you know, on our website, it's going to give you much more detail on the process itself. And here's just some fast facts. Again, being eligible, you must have a STEM major and your major must be associated with a STEM SIP code. The job that you're doing, you must be working in your STEM degree at the time you're doing the extension. You need to have an employer and you'll be working with that employer to do a training plan called the Form I-983, which you are going to be submitting as part of your e-form request to ISSS. But the whole process is very similar to post-completion OPT in that you are starting by getting a recommendation for STEM OPT extension from ISSS and then applying with USCIS. Key things as well is you'll be applying within 90 days before your OPT expires, and you have to make sure that it's received by USCIS no later than the last day of OPT. Again, reporting is very important, even more so when you're on STEM. There's going to be specific validation reports that you'll be able to submit via IPEN for us to be able to validate your CVIS record. There is 6-month validation, so every 6 months, and at the 12 and 24-month mark, or if you end any employment, there are final evaluations. So there's certain things you're always going to want to make sure you're keeping updated while you're on the STEM OPT and continue to do the reporting. Okay, so we're just going to do a little brief overview of frequently asked questions. So my OPT I-20 is more than 30 days old. May I use it to apply for OPT? No. You want to make sure it's very important that if you, for some reason, aren't able to apply right away, that you're reaching out to your ISS advisor. If you're not aware, you can find your ISS advisor on IPEN when you go onto your homepage for IPEN or even Path at Penn. Now, you want to make sure you're contacting them, letting them know you haven't yet applied for your OPT and your I-20 is now more than 30 days old from when they originally issued that recommendation. If you use an I-20 that is over the 30-day limit, they will deny your application. So it's very important that you are getting in touch with your advisor and getting a new OPT I-20. Do I need my EAD before beginning work? Yes. So you're going to be presenting the EAD and the start date should be current when you start work and you're going through that onboarding process with your employer. Can I change my OPT request dates? Now, once you apply with USCIS, no. But if you haven't applied yet, you want to work with your ISS advisor to discuss any change in dates. But it's good, definitely make sure you think about your dates before you submit it. But if you do have to change it and you have not yet applied for OPT with USCIS, reach out to your advisor about that. Can I cancel my OPT if I have not used it? If you, again, similar to the request dates, in that if you have not yet applied with USCIS, make sure you reach out to your advisor about canceling the recommendation. If you have applied with USCIS and it is not, and it's still pending, you can try and have the cancellation go through. Just so you know, none of the fees will be refundable. If it is approved, then you won't be able to cancel it. And if you decide not to use it, it is going to be OPT that is lost. So a question, I already used 12 months of OPT in one program. Will I be eligible for another 12 months in another program? So you get a new period of OPT at each higher degree level. So if you did your bachelor's and you got OPT after your bachelor's, and now you're completing a master's, you will get another 12 months of OPT. Same with doing math. If you did a master's and now you're completing a PhD, again, you'll get another 12 months of OPT in that case. What is my immigration status while on OPT? You will continue to be F1. So you are going to be still in F1 status. You're still going to be under Penn sponsorship. The OPT is a benefit of the F1 status. Okay, so here's just some final thoughts, making sure to check out our website. Make sure you have everything organized, you're planning ahead, read our emails. I know you hear that from us all the time, but it's very important not to miss any important information. When we send you the OPTI 20, make sure to read through that email. It has all your next steps. And just keep any copies of any documents you send, any applications. It's just a good rule of thumb that you're always keeping documents, anything that's official that you're doing, whether it's immigration or just in your personal life as well. And then just, reach out to us for any questions on that. And here's just information on our website and our social media. So this is good things to know if you need to look up more information, get in touch with us, subscribe to our newsletter. It's very useful for you to have events coming up and important reminders. And we encourage you to share any feedback with us, either through the QR code or through the link that's listed there. So we hope you'll do the survey with us as well. And what we will do, we'll give you a second to do that. We will start answering questions. And I invite Madison to come join us again as well.
Hello.
And if anyone, I'm going to stop sharing in a second, but if anyone still needs the QR code, we'll do a couple questions and we'll kind of go back on we'll take the QR code out. So, all right. So, Madison, would you like me to start or did you want to start?
Well, I did answer. I don't know if others saw that. I
Oh,
know someone did have a question of, can we request OPT while we are in another country on our master's thesis? And even with that, no, you cannot apply while outside the US. In this scenario, you would need to make time to briefly come back to the US in order to apply. So that was the answer I provided if anyone missed that. I can take to, see. One of the questions I see is, can someone start working if they apply but do not have the EAD card yet? The answer is no. So even so I know Donna had mentioned before that even if like your OPT is approved early and your EAD card arrives, but the start date on the EAD card hasn't come yet, you do need to wait to work. But if let's say your OPT has been approved and or it's still pending, whichever it may be, and you just do not have the EAD card and your requested start date does roll around, but you still do not have your EAD card, you need to wait until the EAD card arrives in the mail to begin working. And that's even if the start date has passed. And I don't know if you want to take
okay.
one.
All right. Just want to make sure I have the next one. I am planning to graduate in May. What happens if I apply to OPT now, get approved, but cannot graduate in May? Can I be on OPT status, enter and exit US with that OPT endorsed I-20, but still graduate later? Now, it's a good question. And a lot of it's going to depend on what type of program that you're in. So if you've completed all your coursework and maybe you have a thesis or dissertation pending, that is possible. If it's possible that you may not graduate and still need classes, that's going to probably be a good conversation to have with your ISS advisor and your academic advisor to see what your plan is. So a lot of it will depend on some nuance to that in regards to your specific academic situation and what your delay of graduation really entails. And then the next one, so, oh, thank you. I'll let you do those.
Okay.
Could you clarify the normal application time for OPT versus the amount of time for adjudication with CVIS? Do you mean adjudication includes the application time with CVIS? Are these two separate times? So, for the adjudication, so CVIS is not technically, it's actually being adjudicated by USCIS, which is the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service. So when you're submitting your application, so we're giving you, so just to step back, we're giving you an OPT I-20 that is a recommendation for OPT, which is generated through CVIS, but then you're taking that I-20 and applying with USCIS in the online portal. Regular processing time, I think as Madison mentioned, if it goes up and down. Every semester that I've seen, it we see ones that are lightning quick and just a few weeks, and we see I've had semesters where it's gone up to 5 months. So it seems to average around the 3-month range. The premium processing option is something that will promise adjudication, and that is approval, denial, or request for evidence within 30 days, and then as of April 1st, 30 business days. So you have a promise of adjudication, but the other way, there's really no defined time frame. It's more what they're usually processing so many applications within a certain amount of time. And then there's always outliers. So I think and this is the second question.
Oh, let me
Okay.
see if,
There was 2 questions on that
yeah,
last
one
one.
second. Oh, the next one was, do we need to change our F1 visa by going back to the country of origin and reapplying with the OPT documents? Or is there no requirement to go back to the embassy or consulate in your home country and getting a new visa? So the answer is no, you don't need to go back to your country of origin for that reason um, to reapply using those documents. OPT is a benefit of the F1 visa. So it's still going to be similar to before as when you are a current student, that if you are in the US and maintaining valid status and your just visa in your passport expires, it is okay with while you're in the US if it does expire. That is also going to go for OPT as well. It would more than be similar as to when you're a student. The next time that you're planning to travel outside the US, you will need to make time to make a visa appointment and renew. I think more just the bigger difference is going to be when you're attending that interview as a current student versus OPT is you're still going to be providing your most recent I-20 and other, required visa documents, but you'll also be showing the EAD card. You'll probably be asked to show if you have it proof of employment. So it's going to be similar. You're just showing some additional documents to kind of show that you're on OPT.
And just to add on to that, and if you have a visa that's still valid and will continue to be valid, you can still use that visa. That's the same visa, still F1 status, which continues. So that visa remains valid until the expiration date while you're still on F1 OPT or STEM OPT. Okay, so next one is after I graduate and my OPT is approved, but before the work start date on the EAD, can I travel with my I-20, OPT I-20 and valid F1? Suppose one gets OPT with a work start date July 1st, graduating in May. Yes, there's no problem. If you have all the documents that we went over earlier, you may travel before your OPT starts. You're just continuing F1 status, and that's not an issue to travel before the OPT actually begins.
Okay. The next question is the 60-day grace period separate from 90 days of unemployment in post-completion OPT? Yes, there is a difference between the two. The 90 days is not a grace period. That is just within your 12 months of post-completion OPT duration. You are allotted up to a maximum of 90 days cumulative of unemployment. And then 60-day, that's not the grace period. The 60-day grace period would be at either the end of your program end date, or, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because I joke I'm now having a brain fart a little bit. In terms of, if you've properly maintained OPT and at the end of your OPT end date, that is when that grace period's there as well. Donna, is that correct?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
At the end of the OPT end date, that grace period is there as long as you've maintained OPT
Right.
and
It
have
kind of,
not gone to 90 days employment or over. That
right.
is
It gets pushed
also,
to the end.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, and then can we get the slide? Are we sharing that? I can't
So we'll
remember.
probably post right now on the OPT website is one of the previously recorded webinars. So you would be able to go back and look at that one. There's some slight changes, in particular fee increases that have happened, but the actual steps are pretty much the same. And we'll probably have this webinar, take the place of the older one as the new ones get recorded and things have changed. So so we've had to make some edits. But that'll be, and also on the website, all of the steps are all written out and outlined.
And I forgot to add earlier, for the step with when you're actually going into the USCIS website to apply for OPT, from personal experience, there is a nice thing that surprisingly that USCIS does, that when you start an application with them, they will save, and this is for all applications, they will save a draft of that application for up to 30 days. That you can, revisit, and so sometimes I do recommend that, especially if you're just want to get, see what is required in the application, how many sections there are, just kind of doing that, but maybe you're not necessarily, ready to start filling it out, but you just kind of want to know. That is an option as well. That can be helpful. Okay. Oh, yeah, we answered that one. Okay. I can take the next one.
Okay.
Okay. Hi to us. I'm currently working part-time under Penn system, under Workday. Can I still work at Penn between graduation and the start date of OPT? Or do I have to end the employment at Penn before graduation? Yes, you cannot work in between. So because after May 20th, you're no longer a student and have that, eligibility for student employment or just working in general. You would then need to wait until you obtain that work authorization. Like we said before, if it's approved, the EAD card arrives before the requested start date that's on the EAD card, you'll need to wait till that date. If the start date arrives, but the EAD card is not here, like in your possession yet, you do then need to wait for the EAD card to arrive in order to be authorized to work again.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and take the next one. So when you said we have to keep reporting our employment work updates regularly, does this mean we have access to IPEN even after graduation and where we report all our updates? Yes. So IPEN, you're still our sponsor. We're still your advisors. Once all through your OPT, and if you do STEM OPT and IPEN, you'll still have that IPEN access.
Advising as well. You still have access to us as advising
Yeah.
drop-ins and appointments too. Just wanted to add that as well.
Yeah, so that's a big difference is, we're like one of the offices that you're gonna stay with post-graduation, all through your F1 status, while you're sponsored by Penn. And yes, you'll do all your updates. There's an OPT reporting e-form as well as the address and telephone, email e-form that you'll do.
I don't know if Donna, do you want to take this next one? I feel like you may have more
So
experience
what
than
is
I do.
Sure. No, what is the chance of renewing the F1 visa successfully with the offer letter, but without the EAD card in hand yet? I think that could be very risky. And if the EAD is not approved yet, I would definitely be very concerned about going for a visa interview if your OPT is still pending. And also, but if it's approved, having it mailed to you, I think is risky as well. So, I mean, I would say if you're in that specific scenario, you want to reach out to your advisor to discuss it more because that would be kind of beyond a sticky situation in regards to having to renew a visa in that kind of limbo period before the OPT EAD is issued to you.
Okay, I'll take the next one. Oh, I know Noah. Hi, Noah. So I have one question. How common is it for the OPT to be not denied or for USCIS to ask for more information? What would be some of the reasons for denial requests for more info? Thanks. So, and I'll say from my experience, and then Don, you can chime in as well. I wouldn't say it's common. I think it's more often than not if there is a denial or even request for evidence, especially with the denial. I think sometimes if it's kind of a more obvious step was missed. For example, did have a student back in December that were December graduate that they had applied for OPT, but they never completed that first step, which was to request the OPT I-20 from us. So they applied, they actually did get a request for evidence asking for that, and they asked for the I-20 after the fact from us, but USCIS denied it because they said, well, we can see that you requested the I-20. It's dated for after you applied for OPT. So that's just an example of actually one where both the request for evidence and denial were, played a role. But usually it's that, or for example, OPT is offered, per degree level. So there could be an issue, obviously an issue if, maybe you had previously used OPT for a previous master's and you're trying to apply for it again. And again, yeah, Donnie can chime in, but I feel like it is, we do get them, it's usually a more obvious kind of reason why. Yeah.
I would say for regular OPT, requests for evidence aren't as common. Sometimes it could be like there's issue with the pictures, or if there's or maybe a payment, like something with your credit card doesn't go through properly. So those are some of the things. There's not as many issues since they've gone to online versus paper. There's definitely it's reduced, but yeah, the most common are probably, as Madison mentioned, skipping that first step and getting the OPT I-20 first, or waiting for more than 30 days and applying with the old I-20. That's a denial. A big reason we don't issue I-20s more than 90 days before graduation is students have applied one day too early and have been denied for that reason. And and if it's towards the end, and missing the deadline to apply after graduation as well.
Okay. Can we start applying for a job now without starting applying for the OPT? Yeah, I mean, you can start, job hunting, things like that. And then, I mean, you may be asked in terms of, I know a big question that we see that is asked on job applications, or that at least students make us aware of, is that, will you require a sponsorship to be able to take this job? OPT is not an employer sponsored work authorization. It's a benefit of your F1 visa. It's something that you apply for yourself. It does not have anything to do with the employer having to apply for it on your behalf. So, if an prospective employer is asking, you are in the process of applying and obtaining that work authorization, but it does not require employee sponsorship. So just to add to that question, something we commonly get.
All right, next one. I just got a new passport. My valid F1 visa is in my old passport. Can I apply to OPT using my old passport and can continue to enter, exit the US carrying both the new and old passports with me? If you now have a new passport, you want to provide that information. So that's your current passport. That's what you want to use to apply for the OPT. And then carry both when you're traveling.
Okay, my visa is expired. If I receive the EAD card, can I reapply for F1 visa during the summer vacation if that work starts in September, or can I only apply for work visa after work? No, you can, if the OPT has been approved, you've received the EAD card, no, that's fine. That you don't need to wait to start working. I would have with you just the, offer letter or proof of employment that you've accepted the offer or something like that, even if the work is starting in the future. But no, that's not required. You just may be asked to show that, or even when you're re-entering the US, customs may possibly ask. And obviously, if you have that job starting in September, you'll have no issue providing that information. But yeah, that will not stop you from being able to apply for the new visa.
Okay. All right. So if my start date has already begun, assume July 1, and I have a job offer, but I haven't received my EAD card yet, will be counted as period of unemployment. So unfortunately, if it is approved around the start date that you've asked for, that mailing time, if the time for them to mail you the card, unfortunately, it will start. So if your card comes and it says July 1, but it took until July 5th to get to you, that is 5 days.
Okay, next question. I already submitted the I-765 on USCIS and I checked my status last week. It says there's only 1 week before approval. However, I checked again and it jumped to 4 weeks. Do you know why this is happening? So from my experience, as well as even personal experience, because I know many of my own students know that I had a green card, I recently became a citizen. When I was filing for citizenship online, I would see mine go from 2 weeks to 18 weeks. It seems like they've added this new feature into the portal where they want to be able to give you kind of an estimate of how long it'll take, but it seems like they haven't, worked out the kinks in it, and it seems to be fluctuating frequently. So you're not alone. So I would say I would take it with a grain of salt. It's most likely not accurate because, again, this is a new feature. So that's my take on it. I don't know if Donna's heard anything else, but that's just kind of how they want to implement something like that. But they haven't really ironed it out yet in terms of it working efficiently. So yeah, that's my take
Yeah.
on it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. It's the thought is there, but the execution is not there yet. But I think looking at your case, just checking your case status, it's normal for your case status to not change from the time that you see, on this date we received your application to then your OPT has been approved, your card has been issued. It's normal for that not to change. It's that saying sometimes that no news is good news. That's kind of how those case statuses work.
Yeah. And yeah, those updates, I wouldn't put, it's still being, kinks being worked out, as
Yeah.
Madison mentioned. So, this is a good question. What's the best, oh, no, I'm sorry. Can I not travel after I start working for a year? The EAD card you showed said that one may not travel for 1 year after they receive the EAD. Can we not go to our home countries? I think what you're probably referring to is the card says for travel, I believe. And what that means is you can't just use that card to travel. You still need all the other documentation. So it doesn't mean you can't travel. It's just that that EAD card is just the one piece. You still need the F1 visa, the I-20, the passport, as well as the EAD card. But it's not that you're not allowed to travel.
Yeah, it's similar, I guess, to if you were just to show as a currency traveling it as just your F1 visa and your passport, and customs gonna say, okay, can you show me your I-20? Like they all kind of complement each other and are all required. Oh, okay, sorry.
Yep.
What's the best date to start to put on the EAD application if we don't have a job yet when we apply? It's a good question. So I'm going to start with, ultimately it's going to be up to you. I say, your life best, how your job search is going, things like that. What I can say for, I guess, some examples of not dates themselves, but sometimes I guess what we see on our end. I know sometimes if I've had some people where they have a job offer, but it's most likely going to be deferred, or it's going to be later, or they are looking for jobs, but no, especially in their field, even if I do get a job, the earliest that type of job is going to start is August 1. that's maybe then when more often than not we're seeing like a later start date. So, and again, that's just an example of it, and an example really of kind of, knowing your field best, your job prospects best, you know, life, all of that. So, and Don, you can add to that as well, but that's just
Hmm.
kind of an example I
Yep.
say, but it's not necessarily like recommending a specific date or the success rate or anything like that.
Yeah. And it won't change the processing time. So
Yes, that's a good point.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's first in, first out. So if you put July 1 and the person next to you puts May 30th, they're gonna and you apply first, you're gonna be processed. Should be that way, but
should be.
processed
Yeah.
first. You just can't go back. So if you put July 1 and you want to start working June 1, you won't be able to work earlier than the start date, but you could do later with as long as you don't have too much unemployment.
Okay. Oh,
Okay. Is the EAD specific to one job only, or if I do have an EAD before graduation, can I keep working my work study position then transfer to my new job? Now your EAD is going to be for after graduation. And again, any on-campus employment must end May 20th. Any employment that you do once you have afterwards, you have to have the OPT. It has to be related to your major field of study and it has to be have started. The EAD's current. So it's probably a work study position is probably not something that's going to transfer into post completion OPT. You do need to be, working in usually it's like a non-student position, and Penn will usually classify positions that way. Sometimes you may be doing the duties, let's say, of a TA, but you're classified as maybe a temporary worker. But any on-campus employment definitely has to end on May 20th. And it's not specific to one job only. Once your EAD starts, especially more so during the first 12 months, you can have multiple jobs. You can switch every week if you want. It's very flexible. Gets a little bit more stringent once you get to STEM OPT, but during that first 12 months, you can switch as you want. Just keep reporting it via IPEN.
okay. So next question, follow up on the part-time Penn student employment. If my supervisor decides to extend the part-time to a full-time position, I still can't start working at the same position until I get my EAD card and start date of OPT, right? So let me
I'd
read
say
that
that's what
first
I
part again.
I'd say that's what I covered in the
Yeah,
last, yeah.
yeah. And I would too just recommend adding to what Donna said, because I have been asked this a lot quite frequently recently, um, that I just say, talk to your current supervisor and just make sure that they are aware, because they're not going to know unless you tell them this. Because they may say, oh, we're just going to continue on like after, everything can stay the same. They just need to make sure that in payroll or under workday/payroll, that you are no longer in student employment. So as adding on to what Donna said, just make sure you're also having that conversation with them, because they're not going to know that more often than not that change does need to happen in terms of reclassifying your job.
All right.
Okay. Oh,
Do you want to take this one since
I
you
can.
kind of
Yeah,
touched
I
on
can.
it?
Yeah, yeah. And feel free, as I feel like chime in is my go-to word. So when filling out job applications, there is the question, do you now or in the future require sponsorship from the company? Is it legal to click no since we have 1 year of OPT or 3 years with STEM? I've heard some of you will get rejected by the company after knowing they are on OPT. So I'm going to start by saying you want to answer, any question really as honestly as possible. I know that sometimes this can be a little bit kind of murky, kind of gray area, especially when they lump in this type of question and don't have it separate in terms of do you now and then also in the future. Um, I think I think this also, in my opinion, at least when I advise, that I kind of say similar to before when I said, your situation best. Or if in the future, you do know that, if you see yourself long term with this company and are looking kind of beyond OPT and STEM OPT as well, that could influence your decision. I think definitely, though, if the questions are separated and it is referring to do you now need sponsorship, that is a definite no, because OPT is not employee sponsored. But I can understand that, you obviously don't want to, have a company make a decision on you before they've even met you. I can understand that. But I think just being as honest as possible. And again, I think it is a bit of a gray area. Sometimes I even tell students it's, not only is an employer investing time in you, but you're investing time in that employer. So it's one of those, you may want to kind of know now versus later in terms of, transparency and if they are going to reject it or give you those options, things like that. So that's kind of my take on it. But it is, I think, more of a kind of reflection question of how you're going to answer it. But each person's could be different. But I think the most important thing is answering as honestly as possible. Yeah.
Okay. Just to confirm, after getting the EAD and the F1 visa is expired, we need to renew the F1 visa by going back to our home country. Now, normally, this has been definitely what has been advised as the least risky option. We are seeing Department of State kind of, I think, relax in regards to being able to apply at different consulates. So it has to be a consulate outside the US, but it may not necessarily need to be um, your home country. If you want to, things to consider is how long you're going to be where you're going to apply. So maybe it's easier if you're at home versus in a country where you have no connections. And if you have any delays, it's going to be harder to stay there. So that's something to consider. Um, but the next time you do travel, once your visa expired, there isn't that so much of that restriction, but you just want to kind of look at all the factors and how long your travel is and where you can get an appointment, so on.
And I'll add to that too. I know there is more often than not too with embassy or consulate locations, different sets of wait times. There's usually wait times for citizens of that country and then there are wait times for non-citizens. I know, and I've seen it on websites already. It seems that, if there is a major difference between those two wait times, that specific consular embassy's website typically will post that and share that information. So that's also something to consider too. But sometimes I've seen some embassies where it's not that drastic. It really depends. But I know that, if you're just going to that specific location's website, you can, find that information if there is a significant difference in time frame. So something else to consider as well. Okay. So in that case, is it better to put a later date on EAD card for start date so it does not get counted for my unemployment 90-day period? I guess it's gonna be, again, as I said before, kind of up to you. If it is something where, you just decide you're looking for jobs, you're still looking, or as I said before, may, be in a job that's going to start a bit later, whatever it may be, if you do want to choose that later start date to kind of minimize, the amount of time used on like unemployment, that is an option. Again, we don't like recommend kind of or tell you what to do in terms like that, but I think it is something to consider when you are deciding the best date that works for you. So that's my take on it.
Madison, can you just read the next question? I lost the
Mhm.
question things and I can answer it if you could.
Oh, no, it's okay. Okay.
I think I found it actually.
Oh, okay.
You want to go ahead?
Okay.
Okay. I think this is referring back to the question, and excuse my video is starting to get choppy. For a PhD, this was the question before a PhD candidate with dissertation defense remaining. So if you just have your dissertation left, you finish your classwork, you can finish that while on OPT. That is that specifically is not an issue. So you can your all but dissertation, that's fine. You can finish up while you're on OPT. you still want to pursue, like, making sure that you're, able to work full time on OPT before the unemployment time accrues, but finishing up as well the dissertation work. And just a key thing to remember there is, once, before your OPT starts and after the end date that we have for your I-20, you just don't, be careful about when your dissertation and your, excuse me, your stipend or any funding from the university, when that will go to. So you'll want to consider that. But we do have an additional form when you're doing that to kind of go through the things to consider. So we would definitely say, if you're going to be putting down a graduation date that, or a completion date that's sooner than your graduation, you'll be prompted to fill that form out when you do
And
that.
yeah, and I guess to add to that too, I know that that form essentially that is going to be your scenario where you've completed all your coursework except the thesis dissertation. In the e-form, there is a drop down of options that say reason for applying for OPT. And I know more often than not, people choose, applying for, graduating and applying, after graduation. There is an option that does say completed coursework except for dissertation. You are going to want to make sure you click on that, because that is then what prompts that form that Donna is referring to. It's called an affidavit of understanding, and it's something that both you and your either PhD advisor, supervising PI, are both going to need to acknowledge and sign. And then within the e-form, there's a place to upload it, but it's kind of an IPEN glitch where that won't prompt and provide you that form unless you choose that answer. Or two, also, if you want to see the affidavit of understanding ahead of time, you can always reach out to your ISSS advisor and they can send it to you as an attachment. That's an option as well.
All right. I think that we have come to the end of our questions. Thank you, everyone. Really great questions from everyone.
Yes.
Remember, you can reach your ISS advisor. We have, if you look on our advising page, if you need to make an appointment, if the appointments have filled up, you can always look for the walk-in hours that are also on that page. We have either 1, 2, even some days, I think we have 3 now of walk-in hours, if I'm not mistaken. But
Yeah. Fridays, I think, are 3 different
yeah,
times, and Monday is 2. And
yeah.
then in between, so at minimum, at least once every day, there, Monday to Friday, there is a drop in hour opportunity.
Yeah. So, definitely drop in. Hopefully we can, it won't be too busy. But it's been, definitely I've had openings during my sessions. So, don't shy away from walk-ins and or making an appointment for a future time.
Yeah. So can one be an entrepreneur on the EAD card or OPT? So if you're referring to in terms of like having your own business or, something of that sort, well, first it still needs to meet those basic qualifications of related to your field of study, at least 20 hours a week, like all of that. But I know that too, and Donna can add, but that the business needs to be properly registered to be a business. I think with the Better Business Bureau, or I'm not quite sure, but
Or
I just
just,
know,
yeah, it's
yeah,
just
but
like
it just needs to be properly registered as a legit, business license.
yeah,
Um, that's what I know about that for
yeah,
post-completion OPT.
yeah. All right, I think we're going to wrap up there. Have a wonderful afternoon. Good luck to everyone. Anyone that's graduating, congratulations. And thank you, Madison. And
Thank you, Donna.
we will see
Right.
everyone
Bye,
later. Bye bye.
everyone.